I like that sound.
Yeah, sorry, we had a little sound cutting in and out there. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Knowledge with Marty Duffy, Liz Rhoades, and Lou Bryson, plus this week's special guest, Louise McGuane, who I will let your host give a more formal introduction to in just a moment. Real quick, before we get started, I'm Will Hookinga from Savvy.co. Just want to point out a few different ways that you can interact with your hosts and their guests throughout the presentation today. So on your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you are joining us from in the world. At the bottom, there's an Ask a Question button. So if you have a question for Louise or Marty or Liz or Lou at any point during the presentation, just enter your question in there. We'll be keeping an eye on those. And last but not least, feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top that makes that easy. But with all of that said, I will let y'all get to the show now. Marty, Liz, and Lou, take it away.
Thank you, Will. You know, in my my new reboot of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I'm casting you as Hermie, the elf that wants to be a dentist, whereas Liz will be Rudolph, and Lou over there is going to be Klondike, Yukon Sam or whatever.
Yukon Cornelius.
And Louise, if you want, I was thinking Donner, the reindeer coach.
I will take it. Thank you. With my honor, my great honor.
It's a much juicier part than, say, Mrs. Claus or Clarice. Clarice, I thought she's kind of wimpy. I might even
really
write her
good
out.
When you get to the part where Donner throws the party. That's awesome.
Yes.
I'm in.
It's like, I'm going to make that a little more adult at a party. It's going to be a lot more booze. And Donner will have an Irish accent. That'll be kind of nice.
A lot of Irish whiskey.
All right, so everyone, my name is Martin Duffy. I'm a former senior master of whiskey for Diageo at 14 glorious years until I was expelled, and became the national brand ambassador for 18 glorious months for Benedictine and B&B. That was, oh my God, the stories I could tell you. And then for 8 years, I was the co-producer of Chicago Independent Spirit Expo. And for the last 6 years, I have not only been a lovable rogue, but also the sole brand representative for Glencairn Crystal in all of North America. Boom.
I was going to mention I'm actually sipping today out of an Indie Spirits Expo.
Boom. They are collector's items. They never come back. Lizard?
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Rhoades, technical distiller and spirit consultant. Have just over a decade of experience in alcoholic beverage, spanning across a couple different products. So beer, rum, vodka, but my particular expertise and favorite is whiskey. Yes.
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 Spent most of my career at Diageo, but now am founder and principal at Spirit Safe Consulting. And if you scroll down bonus points to the About the Host section, there's a little link to my website. So please check that out. Lou?
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. I'm Lou Bryson. I'm a whiskey writer. I was the managing editor of Whiskey Advocate magazine for 20 years, and now a senior drinks writer for the Daily Beast, and also have my latest book that I'm plugging, Whiskey Masterclass. Thank you so much. And the old favorite, Tasting Whiskey. Currently out and make great Christmas presents. Thank you so much.
Especially at Christmas. At Christmas time, make sure the family gathers around and read page 251, where Lou talks about Martin Duffy. Boom. All right, everyone. Well, today we have a very special guest, a woman I've known for a couple of years. And you know what, Louise, I don't know if you and I might have, were you in Ireland back in 2010 when you worked for Diageo?
Yeah, I think that we met in Dublin at a world-class thing.
Yeah, because it was me and like two other people who were in charge of putting the Dublin World Class together. And so me. So Louise McGuane, you've worked for LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, Pernod Ricard, Diageo, and then for the last 5 years, you have made quite a name for yourself. Like how you grit your teeth.
Yeah, like, what is he gonna say?
Well,
You never know. You never know.
bringing back the art of whiskey bonding to Ireland at Chapelgate Whiskey Company, and starting up J.J. Corry as your whiskey, your kind of flagship whiskey brand. And I mean, that's kind of cool. And you're all over the place. If anyone's on LinkedIn and they're in your network, I see stuff from you every day. You guys, in fact, something we should talk about is just how well you market your brand. Relatively new brand for only 5 years old, but you've put that name out there that I keep on after reminding myself that it's not here in Chicago yet, because I see it so often. I'm like, oh, no, it's not here. That kind of thing. So, Louise, why don't you, for those of you who are not familiar with you, give a little retrospect, a mini retrospect of how you started once upon a time to currently.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks for having me on, guys. First of all, I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Marty, I saw you last in, can't do that, but saw you, Marty in Ireland. Liz, we met at the last big whiskey event, I think, in Seattle, the World Whiskey Forum. And at the time in March, and at the time we had no idea that all this was going to happen. And then the whole world stopped. That's the last time I saw my whiskey people.
Yeah.
Lou, it's great to meet you. I've heard all about you. And your books are actually on the J.J. Corry reading list. Everybody who joins the business has like a reading list.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're on there.
That's the reading list you're on, Lou. I was trying to remember the one you were on. That's it.
Yeah, so my background is it's the drinks industry. So I came out of college and just went almost directly into the drinks industry, and I worked in it mostly with multinationals. So I did some time in New York, I did some time in France, I did some time in London, and then Singapore. Because once you get on that multinational kind of global role train, they tend to kind of bounce you around quite a bit. So I bounced, around those 3 different multinationals for about 20 years. And the thing about working for a multinational, which I think you guys will relate to, is that ultimately it's like being in the Harry Potter film where you have a Death Eater who's like sucking your soul out. Like it gets to a point where it's tough going, basically. And you either decide to just like suck it up and do that for the rest of your life until you retire, or you do what I did, which is you just decide, okay, I could possibly, have a second act, take all the amazing things I've learned in the big multinationals, because you get a brilliant education there, and do it for myself. And that's what I decided to do. This is back now in about 2013 when the idea kind of first hit. And I could see that Irish whiskey was sort of starting to move. Pernod Ricard had done a great job with Jameson in building the category. I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time in America, and I had really watched very closely as the American craft distillation scene had started to burgeon. And I used to go to like ACSA every year and all that sort of stuff, just to sort of meet people and see what was going on. And I kind of had a feeling that what was going on in the US tends like to roll out globally eventually from a trend perspective. So, I felt like, right, it's Irish whiskey's time, it's craft distillation's time, it's, small indie players' time. So I said I'd quit my job at Diageo and move back from Singapore to Ireland here on the farm and start an Irish whiskey company. That was it. I went off and I wrote a business plan. And then I got terrified, and I didn't do anything about it for about 2 years. And I got another job, and then I was like, this is ridiculous. And then I was like, okay, I was just kind of putting it off, because it's really hard to make the leap. Like, it's terrifying to make the leap. So I did it. I just said, look, I'm doing this. And I went off and I started a Kickstarter. And the idea that I had originally here on the farm was to do a grain to glass distillery, because that's what you do. That's it. That's what people do, particularly back then.
Yeah.
And we have, a 60-acre farm here. I was looking at all the plans. I found I researched the history of whiskey distillation locally and all around here in County Clare on the west coast of Ireland where we are. And I found a lot of history, both of legal and illegal distilling. Like everywhere in Ireland, there is a history of distillation. It was part of the fabric of society up until about the 1920s, to be frank. It was like Scotland. We had hundreds of distilleries, lots of different regional varietals, lots of different mash bills, etc., etc. And then it just sort of all kind of died out, just sort of along with the kind of very sad and sorry history of Ireland. The whole industry just became kind of a victim to geopolitical circumstance. So like we had famines, we had wars, we had civil wars, we had trade wars. It just killed the industry in a very brief time period, in about a 50-year time period. So it's kind of weird that like we have this broken history in Irish whiskey. So I investigated all the history, and then eventually I came across this brand that was a local brand in the late 1800s called J.J. Corry. And there was an antique dealer locally selling his labels on eBay, and I went to visit him. As it transpired, that antique dealer in 1983 had been asked to dismantle J.J. Corry's shop. J.J. Corry's shop had been run by his daughter Bridie since 1933, and she hadn't touched anything in that intervening period. So he dismantled the shop, he sold it off to like a local historical park, and then he kept all of the paper ephemera, like receipts and posters and wrapping paper and ledgers and telegrams and all this stuff. So we have this really interesting kind of archive of what J.J. Corry did, and his main trade was in whiskey bonding. So really simply what that meant was, at the time, if you were a whiskey bonder, you were surrounded by distilleries. There was probably 4 or 5 within your, striking distance. You sourced whiskey from those distilleries. You probably kind of sent off whatever casks you had lying around your own shop, because you were probably selling wine and sherry and rum and all sorts of stuff. You sent them off to the distillery, filled them up, and then you custom blended whiskies for your individual customers. So in J.J. Corry's time in like the 1890s, the Vandeleur family were the big landlord family. They would have had their own housekeeper's blend, especially made for them and for nobody else. The Glynn family were a big merchant family. They had their own housekeeper's blend. And in every town in Ireland, that's how it worked, basically. If you drive around Ireland today, you'll still see whiskey bonder written in gold letters over very old pubs. Like it's a hangover from those times. But it all died out. It collapsed with the whiskey industry. And as all the distilleries shut down, we ended up having about 3 distilleries on the island of Ireland by the 1920s. And those distilleries decided to control the route to market, and they began to brand and bottle and blend themselves. And the bonders were cut off, really. And rather than selling Corry special malt, they were selling Jameson, or they were selling Powers, or whatever it happened to be. So I thought that was cool. And I do have a big multinational background, and I realized that if I was still at Diageo, I probably would have paid an agency about $750,000 to come up with that idea, to figure it out. And there it was in front of me, and I was like, I've got a real person, I've got a resurgence of an industry. My contribution to this industry, because I want to make a positive one, is going to be bringing back the lost art of Irish whiskey bonding, which was once a really important part of Irish whiskey. It lent to the variety in flavors and the art of the blend across the industry. And I decided, right, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it properly. It's not just going to be a marketing construct. It's going to stand for something. So I built a big warehouse on the farm, and I went off to source casks, and I went off to source whiskey. And actually exactly 4 years ago today, our first casks landed here on the farm. And
congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. It's
That's why I chose today to have you on the mark that occasion.
It all makes sense.
So,
big celebration. And we became the first whiskey bonder in living memory, and that's what we've been doing ever since.
that's amazing. You know, that's funny you mentioned that. That's what. So I was just reading Nick Morgan's book on Johnny Walker, and that's what Johnny Walker was supposedly doing, was collecting whiskeys from various farmers nearby, usually as payment, and then blending them for his customers.
That's
So,
right.
yeah,
And he
was the bonder.
did exactly that, and he would have blended tea as well.
Yeah.
JJ Corry blended tea because they were little mercantile owners who did precisely that. So exactly how Johnny Walker started off too.
So you are like what was that?
So in the Diageo stable, pretty sure that's how George Dickel got started too.
Yeah, probably.
Dickel
That's
was
right.
a distiller. He was a blending bottler.
Yeah, he was sourcing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, so the bonding whiskey though in Ireland, Lou, correct me if I'm wrong, but here in the U.S., bonded warehouses came around in the 1890s, correct? The 1890s.
Yeah, it was a much later thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, when did that really start happening in Ireland, Louise?
Oh, like the records go, and I did a lot of research on this because once I found the term bonding, like I went into the parliamentary archives, which are the British parliamentary archives, because back in those times we were under the crown and all taxes were paid to the crown essentially. So I've seen documentation going back to the 1700s on it, and it probably goes back earlier. There was really big bonded warehouses in Dublin, all like that were controlled by the government, like by the crown essentially. So it goes way, way back. You know, bonded whiskey has a very different meaning. You guys have a fundamental definition for it over there. You know, we don't. Because we have that broken tradition. But it means something different in theory there than it does here. It stands for the same sort of thing, but it has you guys have a legal definition of it over there.
But it's all related back to taxation.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's funny too.
There's a Canadian definition too, isn't there, Liz? They talk about a bond as a group of barrels that they then blend. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting word, and I mean there are bonded warehouses that don't hold whiskey, and there are bonded warehouses that hold just goods, and essentially the warehouser provides a bond to the person storing the stuff. It's just it's an interesting term.
Basically, it's government oversight, is it not?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, government oversight or just putting up money, actually putting up a bond. Yeah.
From a track and trace.
You're guaranteeing to the government that it's in there and it's going to stay in there. Sorry.
All I know is that I was talking to some folks the last couple of days, telling them that you were going to be on, Louise. I said, yeah, she's a bonder, and she fixes cars. She works on the body of cars. Because you bond like
Bondo.
I go, whiskey bonder.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different definitions of that in general sense. Back to whiskey.
She's a spy. She's a British spy.
What's very cool about it though, because like I said, I brought it back, and then I have to make sure that it means something. It can't just be a made up thing. So I could have just said, "Oh, I'm a whiskey bonder," and stored my whiskey where everybody else stores their whiskey, and then just and bottled it where everybody else, and get somebody else to blend it, and then just said, "I'm a whiskey bonder, isn't it great?" Like, we have full control over the maturation of all our casks, like, and by that I mean, when I buy new make whiskey, I just buy the liquid, and then I go off and I source casks separately, and then we because I match the casks to whatever spirit that we're buying, because we're buying lots of different kinds of spirit. And then we fill the casks here, and they're maturing here. And I can go out at any point of the day or night, open them and see what's going on. So I know them all kind of individually. And then I built a bonder's blending room, is what I call it very simply, here on the farm, attached to the warehouse, so that when we go blending, we have it's not somebody else's facility that we're going into. We can blend, 10,000 liters, or we can legitimately blend like a 50-liter release. We have complete kind of control over the blend from top to bottom. And that's in Ireland, because everything is new again in Ireland in the whiskey industry, right? There was 3 people making whiskey in Ireland for about 100 years, and it was all on massive industrial scales. This smaller, more bespoke, hands-on kind of scale just didn't exist until recently, or re-exist until recently. Yeah. So for me, Irish whiskey bonding means shepherding the spirit from the still, in the case of new make, to your glass, essentially, right? I'm responsible for it the second it comes off the still. And then in the case of the older stocks that we blend, I'm building a really interesting library of Irish whiskey flavors. The long-term goal is that, like, in 10 years' time, I'll be blending whiskeys from 30 different distilleries around the island. Like, nobody else will be doing that, because they're distilleries. They're making their own stuff over and over. So for me, the fun thing about this was, sure, bringing it back is cool, but now defining it and making sure that it stands for something, and I'm not confused as a mechanic moving forward, is really cool.
Go ahead, Liz.
I was saying, you're getting in both new make distillate as well as matured stocks. So there's matured stocks that you're getting in. Is that about doing finishes or double barreling, or is it just about having the control at your site?
You need, they're not going to sit here on the maturation situation. They're done. Like it's been and gone. Like, in certain cases, we'll do some other additional cask influences. We have a 10-year-old grain, we'll pull it out and we'll put it in a tequila cask and see what happens and that kind of thing. But mostly what we're doing with the older stock right now is blending.
Blending piece.
We don't do a huge amount of influences. We do some wacky ones every now and then. But it's predominantly, we have to get going and we have to get moving. And we'll always buy mature stocks if good stuff comes on the market. But the fun thing for me is that now we're starting to buy new make stocks from really small guys who are doing really interesting things that you can't buy commercially. If you're going to buy grain whiskey on an industrial scale, you can buy that all day long. But the fun stuff are the tiny guys up the side of a hill somewhere that are doing like wheat and barley mash bills that haven't been done before and that kind of thing. So that's where it gets interesting for us.
Well, now that brings up a point. Now, first time I ever went over to Ireland with some friends of mine in County Clare, Cooraclare, little town of Cooraclare, and a buddy of mine there was a doctor down in Cork, but his family was in Clare, and he gave me a bottle of poutine that a neighbor of his had made up in the hills of Cork. And it was really good. It was really high in ABV. I mean, couldn't drink a lot of it. He could. I couldn't. But now, I don't know, and I don't know if it's legal over in Ireland, but the word I've always heard is that, there's going to be about 30 distilleries, legal distilleries, but there are plenty of stills around Ireland. Could you actually take some of that poutine and barrel it legally?
No, I would lose. I would have the revenue. It's like America. I would have the revenue down on me like a ton of. I'd lose my license. Like it'd be.
Yeah, but they never find your farm. I tried finding it. It was really hard. You had to come and get me.
We do. I have a horse, right? And I always have a bottle of poutine on hand. So, I rub the horse's legs, and if the horse stuff like that, you give it to the horse.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Very true.
Always the story. Yeah.
The Irish are supposed to be very famous horse handlers and trainers, and they still use whiskey to rub on the horse's joints. Yeah, I think that's just what you do when the revenue guy comes around. you're actually drinking. They go, oh no,
it's for the horse.
It's for the horse. It's pouring that on the horse. Yeah, the horse over here. Yeah.
There's some people making proper legal poutine now. Like poutine has a legal definition now, and it's protected. And some guys are doing a really good job on it. Like the guys up at Ecklandville in the north, Bon Poachine, and some of the new distilleries as well. You know, they're going to be making gin and vodka, and they're going to throw poachine in there because, you know, it's out the door. But poaching is tough going. Like, you know, it's basically unaged spirit. So
Right.
it's got all the characteristics of that. And if you're into that in a really hardcore way, it's great. But it makes for a great cocktail because it's high ABV.
Well, they have legal moonshine over here in the States, but I always find that boring.
But it's not.
To,
Yeah.
you know,
It's not legally moonshine.
You can find some guy making it in the woods and pouring it into an old gallon milk jug. That's real moonshine, and that's what the poutine I had was really delicious, but it was almost pure alcohol.
What is that definition? I don't know if either one of you know.
Yeah, legally. I can give it a go. Like, so this is the other funny thing about Irish whiskey is that there was no protection around anything because just Pernod were making it and that was it. They were just making it. You didn't need to protect it. So they brought in the technical file for whiskey and they brought in the technical file for poachine. The kind of core thing of it is that you can't barrel age it for longer than, I want to say 3 months or very, very short period of time. And you know what? I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's a pretty narrow definition that kind of protects the general idea of it. But
is there anything in there about alcohol level?
I can't remember. I don't think I can't remember. It's high though. It is
high.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is traditionally high, right? Yeah.
Just under the azeotrope. Is that essentially
basically?
Under the what? What was that list?
Hey, Jesus.
97.2.
See, to me, that's the whole thing with poachine. And I mean, the poachine I had was somewhere, and I've tasted new make Bushmills, which was, I believe, 84%, the bottle that Colm gave me. And that was, you know, it tasted really good, but your tongue.
Your horse is junk.
Yeah. Your horse would grow a new leg with something like that. But that's just it. To me, a moonshine or poachine just doesn't seem when it's 80%. Or not 80%, 80 proof. You know, it's kind of like,
agreed.
You know,
it's vodka.
Exactly.
But this is why we put it in a barrel, so we're taking the edge off it. You know, that's why we mature. Like that's
well, but see, now that's what I was asking. But obviously not the illegal stuff. You're taking legal stuff and putting it. What would you put it in the barrel at? What strength?
You'd knock it. I suppose I don't know enough about the poaching. You'd knock it down.
I know we're wandering a bit here.
Yeah, we're getting off topic.
I'm sorry.
Can I drop things back on? I had a bonding question. The control you have that you're exerting over the new make that you're getting, would that be? I mean, would a bonder have had that much, or were they just buying matured whiskeys and blending those?
So predominantly,
I don't know.
Yeah. So historically, predominantly, the majority of the distilleries didn't bother maturing themselves at all. Like they didn't. Like all the big bonded warehouses in Dublin. Like if you want to look at the industrial scale size, we had our own whiskey fire in Dublin, for example. Same reason that you guys have whiskey fires, huge big warehouses. Those were all government controlled, and the distillers predominantly didn't really own them. It was bonders, it was large scale bonders that owned them, and they tended to be in charge of the maturation and the blending. And at one point it became a big issue because we were under the Crown, the not Netflix series, like the government of the UK basically. So technically we were part of the UK. So the bonders at one point in Dublin, particularly when the coffee still kept in, and initially when Scotland were the first to adopt the coffee still and the column still, so they were outproducing us. So they started to import Scottish grain, column still whiskey, and then blend it with the Irish whiskey that they had in Dublin, and that was fine because we were one country, so there was no law against it. But there was obviously, like there always is in whiskey, there's two camps, like for and against. JJ Corry, like that was the big bonding that went on up there. JJ Corry would have been tiny. You know, he's taken in like maybe a couple of casks a month, we'll say, rather than a huge warehouse. But we would have had a distillery in Limerick, Thomond Gate, and we were connected. Kilrush was connected to that by a steamboat that went 4 times a week and stopped at the distillery. So he would have been buying in new make and maturing it for not a very long period of time, probably. You know, it wouldn't be 3 years, more than likely.
Louise said now your JJ Corry is mostly it's single malt blended with single grain. Yeah.
We have so we're kind of known for our blends because as a bonder, you know, we can't just buy in and then sell on. In theory, like we have to kind of get our blending chops going. So we have like 4 in the core. We have a core portfolio that is the commercial portfolio, if you like, that will allow us to grow. One of them is called the Gale, and it's a 60% malt, 40% grain blend. And it has whiskies in there ranging in age from our vintage from 2010 grain all the way up to 1991 malt, like as a top dressing. And then the heart of it is 2002, 2006, a vatting of that, essentially. And then we have a single malt that is all malt from one distillery, but different casks that are kind of married together. And we have a blended grain, actually, which is the first Irish whiskey blended grain, and it's called blended grain.
I don't remember any of those.
Yeah, the blended grain comes from 2 different distilleries, and as a bonder, like that's our vibe. That's what we do. So we don't even have a single grain. I'll show you.
That would be Middleton and the old Cooley distillery.
No, it's Cooley GND for the blended grain. So it's our 4-year-old grain that those casks that arrived on the farm, and then Cooley 10-year-old grain as well. So that's the Hansen, that's the blended grain. I have to angle it that way. And that just came out this year. So this is permanently in the portfolio. I love grain whiskey. I think it's undersung. And I knew I wanted to do an expression of it. And I felt like as a bonder, it was a lot more appropriate for us to do a blended version because it's the first kind of go around that we have of bringing those different distilleries together. And like, that's our kind of whole vibe. So then we do mad stuff every now and then, like the Battalion, this one. And this is a cask influence that we did. It's a grain that's been influenced, it rested in tequila casks for like 10 months. And it was an experiment. People loved it. So we're going to make it part of the permanent collection as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I'm just waiting. COVID put pay to my tequila cask delivery coming from Jalisco. Basically, I had sourced a big container of them, and COVID just killed it. So that's kind of been delayed. So we have that core portfolio, and then we do things like this. We do these like really tiny 200 bottling, like we call them Bonders blends, because that's exactly what JJ Corry would have done.
Oh, cool.
Cool.
So they're really, really small runs. This one was done for actually a Facebook group in the United States who really wanted their own bottle. They're all Irish whiskey enthusiasts.
Is that Drammers?
No, it's Irish Whiskey Fans of America.
Oh, okay.
But normally we do these in the rest of the world. We do them for accounts. So, you know, it's a great way of building relationships with really good high-end accounts that you want to go into. They come over to the farm usually, you sit down, you go through all the casks, and you create a blend over a 2-day period, and then we bottle it for them and label it for them, just like JJ Corry would have done, but on a more global and bigger scale. But it's just a great way of building relationships with individual accounts. It's like a cask pick.
Single barrel. Yeah, the Bonders twist. Yeah,
except it's a bit more involved because you're blending.
Right.
If you go into the rack house, we do a bunch of blends, and it's really cool. So
that's neat.
Yeah, so that's our little portfolio.
And are you doing all the blending yourself, or do you have a team helping you out?
In the early days, the physical blending, I have a decent nose, but like I'm a fan of surrounding yourselves with people who are better than you at certain things. So I'm lucky enough to have worked with some geniuses in my career on the nose front.
Yeah.
Like you, that's correct,
Yeah.
Marty. And Liz, we must have crossed paths maybe at some point. I don't know. But when you're in the industry long enough, you'll meet people who will be kind enough to come on the journey with you and help. Yeah. So on the nose front, I have some geniuses that I work with in relation to developing the blends. And we convene very regularly, and we go through what we need. We talk about what we're going to buy, particularly on the mature stock. We assess all the new make that we're buying and that kind of thing. But on the physical blending side of things, in the early days, it was like literally me and pumps and tanks and on doing casts and stuff like that. But now I have somebody on site who helps with that. Thank God.
Well, talk a bit about on site, because it's really interesting. That's your family farm. It's not something you went out and sought out and bought something kind of quaint. You actually live in. Was it your grandmother or great grandmother's farm, or does it go back even further?
It goes like everything does in Ireland. It goes as far back as records go. So it goes like literally, yeah. And so as far back as the records go, my family on my grandmother's side were living here, and then so it's my dad's mom. Let's just imagine, and it's my father lives less than a mile away, right, on the other farm down the road, and then my great aunt died in estate with no will. So in the 80s, so my dad had to borrow money from my aunt in Alabama to buy the farm, basically, and he bought it and kept it in the family. And then he farms it now. He's 80, he's 82, I guess, and he's still farming.
Oh my God!
What do you?
Oh, wow!
What do you grow there? What do you?
It's a dairy farm. It's a dairy and beef farm. So it's just it's cows. It's like cows. And he's rearing calves at the moment and that kind of thing. So it's pasture that they graze, and then we make silage out of it for the winter time, so they can eat it in the winter and stuff like that. It's beautiful, and it's right on the coast, and we have a huge big forest here and a big bog, and it's ancient. We have an old fairy fort on the farm, and there's all kinds of stories associated with it, of stuff that went on here over the years, and the history of this place is just as interesting as the history of Ireland.
You're located east of Loophead, correct?
That's right.
And then you're north of, what's the inlet that separates Clare from what is that? Is that Kerry?
Yeah, it's just the Shannon Estuary.
Where Dingle is.
Yeah, Dingle Peninsula. If you could drive straight to Dingle, you would be there in 30 minutes. But you're
if there was a straight road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if there was an actual straight road, like a bridge, or you were on top of a large bird.
Yeah, exactly. It's known as the Wild Atlantic Way. That's where we are. It's very beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
It's very Irish. And we capitalize on that, that sense of regionality in Irish whiskey had disappeared, and that sense of place. And that's very important for us, because I set up the business with really good intentions as well. It's a pretty deprived area, it's rural Ireland. It's like rural Alabama, right? It's tough going. There's no Wi-Fi. There's not a lot of jobs. And to have a business like this in this area is insane. Everybody here is a farmer. So it was very intentional for me of setting up here, preserving the future of the family farm, because the family farm future now is whiskey bonding, very simply put. And, hiring the local people and getting them involved in the story. Every bottle of JJ Corry has the name Cooraclare on the label, and I take immense pride when I walk into some highfalutin bar in New York and I see that on the back bar. It means a lot to me, getting the name out there.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Speaking of the farm, we actually have our first question. I think it's related to this topic, so it probably makes sense to ask now. So from John Burns, Louise, will you be doing tours before Christmas? And if you are, will you look at the car for the NCT?
I have no idea what that means.
Probably want you to do some bonding on the car is what I'm thinking. Some repairs.
John got into
okay.
an accident and wants to come over and get his car fixed. The answer is we will not be doing tours before Christmas because of, COVID and da-da-da. And I won't be fixing your car.
Just rub some whiskey on it. I don't know, like.
And Louise, so you know, we have to give a little shout out to some of the folks who are here. I mean, we're doing. We have a nice representation. You got Todd McCoy from Minneapolis. You have Anje from Glasgow, Scotland, I believe. Brad Krause from Panama. And is that Brian? Venezuela. What a name. From South Florida. You ruined it. It should have been somewhere exotic, Costa Rica or something.
I mean, South Florida is exotic.
I guess so.
Florida's plenty exotic, dude.
Compared to Chicago.
Depending on what part of it.
And then you got, and then you have a native. You have Mark Gouty from Newtownards, Ireland. Newtownards.
Yeah.
There you go.
Newtownards. Is that one word? Is that supposed to be one word?
I'm having fun. This is good.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, listen.
I was going to say, so you mentioned your core lineup, and you're in the States, right? You mentioned New York City, but where else are your markets right now for that core lineup?
So we are in New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. We're in randomly Tennessee and Georgia because we have people affiliated with the business who are very close to it, to those two states. So they're lovely. They're really great little states for us, actually, because they're not noisy states for Irish whiskey. And we're in California as well. So our like you got to remember that like we only hit market in 2018. That's like 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It feels like forever, but like we're babies, So the strategy has been, get in, do a bit of learning. Finding distributors is tough going. It's really, really tough going. But we're getting a bit of attention now, a little bit, So I think in 2021 we might see a bit of a change on that. But the first 2 years has just been like dig in, learn, and apply that learning. Of course, 2020 has thrown everyone for a loop. We were fortunate enough that we had decent off-premise presence in the markets that we were in. We had good distribution with direct-to-consumer facilitators like Caskers and Flavier. So it kept us ticking over. 2020 was going to be a really big on-premise push for us. And then...
Right.
I think it was the Chinese conspiring against you. Just you. That's my point.
That reminds me of the distillery. Rabbit hole.
Yeah. Go down one.
Go down rabbit hole.
I had a question just about things falling apart and how could things get worse. Is anything going to happen with access to Bushmills whiskey? Right. Everybody keeps telling me no, but what's that?
Sorry, you broke up there, Lou. Say that again. Sorry.
Sorry. Is there going to be an issue with access to Bushmills whiskeys with Brexit happening?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, on that side. Yeah. Okay. So probably. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. So we have, the UK is quite a big market for us now. We have a very good partner distributor there, and they haven't figured it out. They just haven't gotten it together. We're front loading. We've done this twice now because Brexit was supposed to happen twice already. So we're front loading all of our stock into the UK in December because at midnight on December 31st, the custom systems stop working.
Oh.
And the solution that they put in place is no solution. It's just 400 bits of paper and triplicate instead of some buttons. So I think the customs thing is going to be a bit chaotic for the first few months. Everybody's front loading their stock though, including Bushmills. Like everybody is just loading up. You can't get on a container ship to the US at the moment because of that. Everyone's getting that done. So probably is the answer though. Yeah, that's a mess. That's really bad for alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a reason. We're at Glencairn. We're actually experiencing problems shipping large shipments internationally because there's a container shortage. Believe it or not. Yeah. Also, too, I was. Have you hit like other real big Irish whiskey markets like Germany? Germany is huge for like Tullamore, I think it's one of its biggest markets. And then Australia. There's a Facebook Australian whiskey group, if you're not familiar with them, but a lot of Irish down under watching the drains circulate the wrong way. Yeah.
I was waiting for you to attempt your Aussie accent. I thought you were going to try there for a second.
Fucking hell, I sighed.
Encouragement. Guys.
Oh, is that an alligator? That's a crocodile. Oh, here's a knife. That's it. That's as good as I can.
So I had a question relating back to, you mentioned working with some of these, sourcing from some of these real small distilleries. Is there, some additional collaboration that happens more upstream because of the nimbleness, or is it just strictly on the bonding, blending side?
Yeah, there is now, because I was one of the first wave of the indies in Ireland, right? Like we were the first wave. There was myself and Peter Mulryan and a few others, and some of the others would be like 25 million euro projects, right?
Yeah,
and they're in a different league to us. We started off with $1, but there's a bunch of us in the very beginning who were indie in the truest sense of the word, like no investors, no nothing.
Wow.
And we did our best. It was literally myself and Peter for a long time trying to just every now and so Peter sold me some equipment and bits and pieces. So it was very lonely in the early days because there was no gang, if you like. There was just Pernod and Diageo and then J.T. Corry, and that kind of thing. So now there is a second wave, and I'm delighted about it because I've spent the last 4 years, doing everything wrong and making all the mistakes and figuring out all the stuff. And we now have a little group together, the Guild, we call it. Modeled on the Guilds in America. That, we all talk and we share information and we help each other on everything from how do I fill out this piece of paperwork to do you want to buy some, do you want to buy a load of empty casks and ship them in the same container to save on shipping costs. So that is now beginning to happen upstream. But I'll be honest, and I'll say, the Irish whiskey industry from a collaboration standpoint has in the past not been brilliant because it's dominated by big guys.
Sure.
We are now getting into a place where there's a second wave, and there's folks like me who I'm all about helping people around me because being a whiskey bonder is all about building relationships anyway. And I just remember being in the cowshed here on the farm where I built the office, that if I had somebody just to answer those questions for me, I would have saved so much time. So I'd be very egalitarian in that regard, and so would quite a few others nowadays. It's good.
I would think too, because of what you're doing, going around to the various distilleries, sourcing the liquid, you'd almost have a pretty good idea of who's doing what and how each of them are doing, especially over this past year. I mean, how you had a burgeoning community, a burgeoning crop of new distilleries. Some had just gotten up and running. You had about 10, I think, that were in the planning stages, and a few more I've read about that seem to be coming, starting to find, construction beginning. But how has this past year been on the Irish whiskey distilling community? Is it taking its toll, or people surviving?
You know what? It's interesting. I think it's unlike the craft distillation situation in America, which again I'm keeping an eye on, like I think that's been very tough. The model here, the model here is always an export model, and it has to be because you can. If you live in Dublin and you're Teeling or you're Jameson and you have a big visitor centre, you'll get 50,000 or 100,000 visitors a year. Good luck. If you're in rural Ireland, like where I am, you'll be damn lucky to get 15,000 visitors in 1 year, every year. And you'll be lucky to get them. Very lucky to get them. Anywhere outside of Dublin, you cannot rely on tourism. It's dead in the water. And most of the guys who had set up in the last couple of years are at a stage in the business where they're not really kind of reliant on anything at the moment. They're just trying to get the distillery going or whatever. And if we were 5 years down the road, you'd have people with very specific business models in place that would probably collapse. But at this juncture, nobody is making a profit. We're at that point of the evolution of the thing. And they probably have investors and and all the rest of it. So you're still seeing planning permission being granted for distilleries. You're still seeing activity on that front. What you'll see go by the wayside are the random independent bottler black brands that maybe popped up in the last few years and kind of carpet bagged on the whole thing. You probably wouldn't even have known who they were anyway because they probably didn't manage to develop the export market. But you're seeing it's safe enough right now. Like we haven't had any major disasters. We haven't had any major shuttings or closings or anything yet because we weren't at a high enough risk point, really. But it'll be, talk to me in a year and we'll see then. I think what happened initially in the very early days, everybody that I spoke to was making hand sanitizer like it's going out of fashion, That was the big thing.
Probably more hand sanitizer than hands.
Yeah.
And a lot of whiskey came on the market, a lot of whiskey came on the market that I hadn't seen before, and I bought a bunch of whiskey during lockdown. So the thing about the whiskey is that it's this amazing asset, and the price of Irish whiskey now is so astronomical that if you have 10 casks of it, you're fine. Like if you sell them on the wholesale market, you'll be okay. So I'm not as fearful for it as you might think. Like the other key thing about it is, according to IWSR, across all spirits in the US, and let's just look at the US because that's the only market that matters for Irish whiskey, really. Anyway, according to IWSR, Irish whiskey will be back on track in growth pretty quickly in 2021, and we're the only spirit category that didn't drop dramatically in 2020. The category is so strong alongside tequila that at the moment that it's not like the bottom fell out of cognac completely this year, but we just kept ticking along and it's still in growth. And that gives investors confidence. It gives banks confidence. It gives importers and distributors confidence. So you're not going to have a catastrophic thing go on in Ireland, I don't think.
Yeah, I also, the other thing I worry about, and we're talking about a whiskey that's gone on the market at a very high price tag, is Irish whiskey kind of leapfrogging in a very small period of time from being very affordable and being the kind of everyman's drink. I mean, college kids have really glommed onto Jameson because it's affordable and it's easy to drink.
Easy to drink.
Kind of the Miller Lite of Irish whiskey, but yes, and the standard. And so they make some very fine whiskey, but I'm just saying. But then all of a sudden, it goes like Scotch to the point where everybody's putting out these old age statements, or it's rare. Yeah. Therefore, it's going to have such a high price tag that the everyday guy who used to go to his corner pub can't really. It's going to be out of his price range,
Okay, I don't agree with that, and here's why. And I'm really guilty in this, right?
There you go. That's why you don't agree.
I'm very guilty. I'm very guilty making this happen. You can buy a bottle of JJ Corry for $50, right? All day long, and you'd always be able to buy that as long as you live. And you can also buy a bottle of JJ Corry for $7,000, right? There's only 100 bottles of the $7,000 one, and they're all sold anyway, so you can't get them ever again. But you'll always be able to afford a $50. If you're a person who buys $50 whiskey and you can get a bottle of JJ Corry for $50, If you want a $14 bottle of Irish whiskey, you can get a bottle of proper 12. There is something for every price range. Like some people will never buy the proper 12. Some people will never buy the $7,000 thing. But for the category to mature, I was very worried in the beginning that we were on a race to the bottom because I travel around a lot in the United States, in particular our core market, and I walk into a bar and they will have 250 beautiful scotches on the back bar, beautiful. And they'll tell you everything that you need to know about Scotch. And then they'll have Tullamore Dew or Jameson on tap for picklebacks in the front bar. And I've been working in a category that exclusively does picklebacks, and that's what we're known for. The category had to be elevated. I did it, Pernod did it. As long as it's done in a way that is authentic and, services a particular market, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And I don't think it ruins it for everybody else because you can always go out and buy your Jameson tomorrow.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, if you use the Scotch model or even bourbon now, I mean, a lot of certain whiskeys, they were very affordable, and all of a sudden, even a very affordable whiskey can become that unicorn all of a sudden that everybody wants, and then boom, the price just skyrockets. And with your company, when you get more distribution, you're going to have, you're not going to have as much product, and so when the prices rise, and then people go, I would have tried JJ Corry, but I didn't get in there quick enough when it was still affordable for the little guy.
That'll never happen. I'm telling you right now.
All right.
That will never happen to us. Like,
this is being recorded.
It'll never happen. Legitimately, we make whiskey for everybody. We make whiskey for whiskey drinkers at kind of different sort of levels. And I don't think that has happened in Irish whiskey yet. That specifically what you're talking about there, formerly accessible bottles suddenly being 10 times the price, at retail. That hasn't really happened in Irish yet. You just get anomalies. The secondary market blows things up and stuff like that. But you won't see it from, and I'm promising you won't see it from J.J. Corry.
Okay.
Ever. So,
a question back to that elevation of the category. What's driving that? Is that more about authenticity, or is it flavor, experiential? What does that look like?
For Irish whiskey, it's down to rarity, right? No matter how you slice it, because we have this weird history of whiskey making, and we only had a few people making it for a period of time. If you Google 50-year-old Scotch, you'll get 50 or 60 results straight away of 50-year-old Scotch that you can buy right now. You can't buy a 50-year-old Irish whiskey, for example, right? It's just not possible. I'm sure it exists somewhere, maybe up in Bush somewhere, it's there, but 50 years ago, they were just blending everything at 3 years old. Because there was no market for Irish whiskey. Why the heck would they just, they were on reduced production capacity, and
why keep it?
They just weren't making that much of it. They're just blending it. It was pile it high and sell it cheap. So they weren't thinking 50 years into the future, really. So there is definitive rarity in Irish whiskey, and I can tell you that as a bonder whose job is to go out and source whiskey all the time. It's impossible because there just isn't that much of it around right now. Yeah. So when you see the really older expressions come out in Irish whiskey in particular, they are very rare and they are very qualitative. Some of that stuff that they were making back in the 90s and earlier than that, it's spectacular stuff, I think it's that, and I think it's a general desire to take the category to the next level as well, from a purely business standpoint, rather than just a whiskey lens. There is a desire to kind of make that happen in a way that has learned, its trade to some degree from Scotch. And there's a market for it, and that market has to be serviced. And if Irish doesn't service it, Scotch will.
Someone else will, yeah.
It's always been that little struggle between Irish and Scotch whiskey, at least for the last 130 years, 150 years, really. A little fighting for various markets. They always have been.
They've been kicking our ass for 60 years. It's now is our time to shine.
Well, you guys almost went out of existence after Prohibition. I mean, it was nuts. I mean, there was, I think, if I remember my little Irish history correct, I think Bushmills was the only one who had some aged stock when Prohibition was lifted, and they basically just shipped it all over to the U.S. So but then they go, oh, we're all
Wait
out.
a minute.
Start making, and it's a 3-year thing, and I think that's how actually Blackbush came into being. It was older stock that they made. What about, here's another thing I was curious about, because you mentioned spirit, and I know you don't want to call it whiskey until it's at least 3 years old, but would you bond other spirit being made in Ireland? Like rum or maybe a barrel-aged gin or...
I would for the heck of it, because I tell you what I'm really interested in doing, and this is really fun. I'm very interested in starting a collection of American whiskeys, specifically American single malt. Because why not? I think it's just like an interesting. I think it's a very interesting sort of concept. I wouldn't mind in the future making a world whiskey. Chichibu did that quite well back in the day. And I wouldn't mind looking at some new world whiskies from America and maybe Sweden and Denmark and all over the place and doing a bit of an experiment. The nice thing about being a bonder is that you can just try those things and see if they work, and if they don't, they don't. But in terms of the other spirit, there isn't a lot of other ageable spirit really being made. There's a bit of rum, but not a huge amount. And that barrel-aged gin has a life cycle. Really, I'm not a massive fan of it, to be frank.
I'm not either.
But I would look at other New World whiskies, and buy a few speculative casks here and there for the heck of it. I think that's an interesting concept.
I think Lizard has a question for you.
I do, but it's actually not my question. It's Andre's question. Andre. So thank you for the question. And the question is, any plans for some small-scale distilling to add on to your business?
By yourself, yeah.
No. I have the great thing about being a bonder is that I don't have a distillery.
Yeah.
It's painful. I work with, so if I want to get something distilled, there's a number of people that I can work with on a very small scale. Right. And I don't have to go to the hassle of commissioning a still here in Ireland. I have people that I've worked with from day one, in the whiskey industry, who are just getting their stills commissioned now, and I'm on the market.
Yeah.
The barrier to entry in Ireland for still commissioning and all that stuff is really it's 1,000 times harder than it is in the US. So I don't want the hassle of that because the business is kind of rolling now. But I work with a small distillery here in County Clare who have their still commissioned and they're ticking along. And if I want to do some small bits and pieces, they can do, we'll work together on it, and they're only up the road. So I personally won't do it. But come back to me in 15 years. You never know, But for now, no.
I want to see Louise McGuane 15 years from now. Being the old whiskey.
I'd be happy to see anyone 15 years from now.
Yeah. Oh, Louis, she'll be around. I can propped up probably on with a board behind her, just talking. Hey, Lizard, do you want to get John's?
Oh, okay. Didn't even see that there. Okay, so our next question from John. Who does Luis think is producing the most pronounced new make spirit?
Interesting.
The most pronounced? The most what?
Most pronounced. People say it the most. No, I mean, I think the character has
distinctive.
Most interesting, most distinctive. Yeah, let's go with that.
So, yeah, it's a good question. There's so much sort of going on at the moment. I think the lads up at Killowen are doing interesting things. He has a direct fired still, and there's one or two of them that have that now.
Oh, nice.
And that's good fun. It's interesting. The guys, Peter's doing some really interesting stuff as well. For consistency, Cooley's banging out really consistent stuff like it always did, and so does G&D on a very big scale. Yeah, I'm just basically naming everybody now. The most interesting thing I've had recently, and I bought a bunch of it, like as much as I could actually quite recently, is Glendree, the local distillery that we have here, that they're making 70% wheat, 30%, 80% wheat, 20% barley, distilled in a pot still, and that's really interesting. Like, it's, you know, the mash bill is way off piece for Ireland. That's just not a thing that we bother with or do. And that spirit, like, because I taste the traditional mash bills all the time, and it is what it is. It's hot, and it's this and that, and it's cereal. But this was really delicious. It was really interesting, and it had these lovely creamy kind of characteristics. So, yeah, and that's a very recent acquisition of ours, and I'm really excited about it. And we're putting it into a combo. We're putting it into virgin oak, you know, which you don't really do around here either. It needs it, and we're with various different toasts on it. So it's quite an interesting thing for us to be doing. And then we put in some random casks as well as experiments. Like, we put in some ex-bourbon and some all sorts of stuff. But I think it'll do well in the virgin oak. So I'm pretty excited about those guys at the moment. To be very frank, like the level of quality of distilling that I've come across the board, because of the regulation around it, is pretty good. You know, but you don't have, you know, 1,500 backyard distillers. Like, everybody's a pretty serious operation and have to go through so many hoops and hire so many consultants and feasibility studies, that you tend to get pretty decent stuff happening most of the time.
Yeah, I would think, because in Ireland, I got this impression that in Ireland it's actually much more difficult financially to start a distillery than some of the folks over here, depending upon the state over here in the U.S. And so, yeah, you have to be really serious and really in it, and actually too, it's kind of interesting. In fact, I was going to ask you: are you with the way the big guys started coming around and sinking their teeth into anybody who was thinking about building, like Slane? Brown-Forman got in there and built the distillery for them. Bacardi with the Teeling boys, and you know, almost all the big guys have an investment in something. Is that something that you would entertain if someone approached you, especially since you worked with most of the big guys?
I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, I think you're seeing a bit of a fallout now with a lot of those incubator programs. You know, everybody has one. Like, sometimes, like, I think a lot of those incubator programs, I've been inside Diageo, and they're not great at doing small, right? They're really good at doing huge, brilliant people. But, like, you ask them to sell 100 cases of something versus 10,000 cases of something, and this kind of computer says no kind of thing. So I'd be very careful. Like, I've talked to everybody, of course I have. You know, we're too early stage anyway, by the way. But at some point, if you want to be a huge business, you don't have to talk to a multinational, but you're going to have a capital investor or somebody like that, and that's what Teeling needed, and that's what Slane needed, and it's a different business. Like, it's a different business. That's a huge, big business, and that's not our bag at all, really.
Because the Walsh family had a falling out with Di Serrano.
I mean, that was a tragedy. Like, basically, Bernard built that distillery, and then Di Serrano were like, "Yeah, get out." And that was it. That's like tragic. Like, I don't know how you get over that. And then Luxco were building a distillery up in the north, the Quiet Man.
Oh, right.
And they pulled out of it as well. They're like, no. They were halfway. Like, they were commissioning the stills 1 week. And then the week after they pulled, and it's dead now, that project.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you have to be really careful, like, particularly in early stage, because we're all too small at the moment. Like, you know, Teeling were always big. You know, they were a big business. Slane they built the distillery, but they built it at Slane Castle, which is this huge big estate. You know, it's not a small thing. If somebody came in here and took over JJ Corry tomorrow, you'd never hear of it again. You just wouldn't. So 15 years, like I said, talk to me in 15 years.
Yeah, we were joking. Were we joking about this yesterday? How John Teeling sold the old Cooley distillery to Beam, then turned around, took that money, bought the old Harp Brewery in Dundalk, and basically took all of Beam's potential of sourcing whiskey for anybody, because now he's kind of the go-to guy there.
He outproduces.
Screwed you.
He outproduces Cooley, it's crazy. I bought there's not a better operator. The respect that I have for that man, I can't. He is the best operator I've seen on the planet. He's incredible. So my hat goes off to him.
Yeah, he's a smart business guy.
Mm-hmm.
Very smart. We spent a day with him, and also, it's funny. He'll show you around that Great Northern Distillery, take you around, tell you what he's going to do, show you this, show you that. We go back to his son's distillery back in Dublin, and then he starts leading a tour. He just kind of gloms onto a little tour and starts giving the tour, and he said, "Yeah, do all this stuff, and you like this? Gotta go, everyone.
You're back.
Yeah. I gotta go buy a country somewhere. I'll be right back."
Yeah, he still has diamond mines. That's his whole shtick. Is that he literally?
Oh, wow!
Diamond mines. Whiskey is like a secondary thing. It's diamond mines.
I remember interviewing him and asking him, "Isn't opening a distillery kind of risky?" And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. He's like, "Don't you know what I do?" I'm like, "No." He says, "I prospect for gold." I'm like, "Never mind."
Yeah.
Well, Louise, do you deal with a lot of distilleries that are mainly in your area? Like, do you deal with West Cork or Dingle or any of those, or do you just go far afield? Whoever.
I go everywhere I can. Not everybody. A lot of the guys won't sell a whiskey. They're hanging on to it and they don't have a wholesale piece. But it's I think with whiskey buying, it's just going to depend on the market forces. It's like I said, there was a lot of whiskey on the market now this year, and next year could be different, etc., etc. So my job is to sort of be out there and be seeing what's going on, and then buying where I can. So I'll go anywhere, if the spirit's good enough. You're always really safe buying from those bigger guys, because it's just a beep, beep, boop, it's a computer, And with the smaller guys, then, it's a more personal relationship.
Right.
But, I'll go anywhere,
Maybe Liz could help you in all her travels find casks for you, barrels.
And Liz and I are definitely going to work together. I saw Liz give a presentation in Seattle, and I swear to God, I understood about 2% of it.
Thank you.
It was crazy.
Thanks, Louise.
I need to work with this person. This person. It's like I said, surround yourself with people who are far superior to you in certain things, and wow.
I would welcome the opportunity.
Just have a thesaurus handy. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Well, thank you very much, Louise. I really appreciate you taking this time. I hope you're enjoying your branded, personalized Glencairn glass. I know they're probably at the
farm.
Let me just grab it because it's at the other side of the room and I forgot to grab it.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So to me over there. What's the matter with you? You didn't drink it out of.
Yeah, so these arrived. And I was like, what's this? And then I actually kind of took it out and I immediately knew. I was like, oh, that's Marty. Definitely.
Yeah.
That is us. That's from the knowledge.
Oh, very nice.
Start having them put some knowledge in there.
There it is.
Oh, look at
Even
that.
better.
Oh, look how the light shimmers on that.
I love them.
Non-lidded crystal.
Really good.
Beautiful.
And I love the black ones that came out recently, the colored version ones that came out. That was a really cool set as well.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys have seen it. And Louise, I don't know if you know Marianne Eves.
I'm dying. I saw it. I want to get. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
It's very
kit.
sleek.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
James Bondian. I thought that's if James Bond needed a whiskey sensory kit,
So cool.
that's what he'd have.
Bondian.
He's a James Bonder. So Lou is going to send you 100 signed copies of his book from his personal collection.
I
So-
think technically, like, this is on our reading list. Like, I think one of your, I can't remember which one, but we've got like you, we've got Fred Minnick, Whiskey Women. We've got a couple of other bits and pieces as well. But I'd have to double check that because we haven't revised it in a while. When did the new one come out, Lou?
February.
February. Okay, yeah.
Just in time.
We need to update it, so we'll have to get that one in. Yeah.
Amazing.
I won't even let you. I'm not even going to spoil the ending. But it's a surpriser. It's a grabber. Plus, he makes fun of Fred a lot in that he really tears Fred apart. He tears Fred a new one in this. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, especially all you folks from other countries. That's so great. Enjoy
Very,
it.
very cosmopolitan group today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking up for JJ Corry in your market. Little Lizard, who do we have coming next week?
Great question. We have Stephen Beam of Limestone Branch.
That's
So
right.
we're very excited about that conversation. So be sure to go ahead and sign up.
That's right. The Limestone branch of the Beam family. How do you like that? Boom. Actually, that's really great. He has some great stories and insight into the Beam family.
I believe aren't they also connected to the Dant family? I think.
There.
Yeah.
That's right. Lynn Dant has a new distillery that I believe is opening up this month or next. Yeah, down in Kentucky.
And we'll learn all about that next week.
That's next week.
Right.
Luis, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Louise.
Merry
Virtual
Christmas.
cheers.
Sorry, with you in person the next time. We'll our paths will cross again.
Each will. You hire Liz to help you out. Lou and I come with it as a package.
Mascots.
Sidekicks. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Luis. Cheers.
Merry
Cheers.
Christmas.